High Command in Tokyo maintained absolute confidence in the Bismarck Sea convoy's strategic invulnerability, authorizing the transfer of 6,900 men, 489 metric tons of ammunition, and 123 motor vehicles to Leh. The logistical planning relied on swift embarkation at Rabul's Shokan Pier, adherence to tight movement tables, and calculated sea transit intervals under the assumption of nighttime aerial neutrality. War planners allocated a 54-hour window for total crossing, banking on a torpedo net, layered destroyer screens, and continuous fighter cover to secure passage against Allied interdiction. Pre-mission briefings emphasized the sufficiency of Type 96 anti-aircraft guns and limited exposure intervals, all calculated to withstand projected attrition below 10%. Japanese naval staff forecasted that the Leh landing would proceed on schedule at 0730 hours on the 4th of March, 1943, with disembarkation completed within 96 minutes of anchoring. Planners calculated maximum expected losses at 620 men, equivalent to 9%, with damage assessments restricted to 2 transports. The actual aerial engagement commenced at 0943 hours on March 3rd, accelerating Allied strikes 630 minutes ahead of timetable projections. By the close of operations at 1830 hours on the 4th of March, 83% of convoy personnel and 100% of embarked vehicles were confirmed destroyed or lost at sea. Recovery efforts verified only 1,200 survivors, resulting in a 17% success rate for Japanese force projection to Leh. The convoy's destroyers, Fubuki class and Shiratsuyu class, featured belt armor of 19 millimeters and 21 millimeters respectively, with deck armor rated to resist 14,800 pounds per square inch shell, impact, and splinter damage below 3,900 pounds per square inch. Transports carried gun shields, averaging 10 millimeters of high tensile plate. Defensive AA coverage reached effective altitudes of 3,050 meters. Contingent on wind velocities, averaging 14 knots from 110 degrees east. Variable impacting smokescreen dispersion and low-level bombing accuracy. Supplemental weather recording from the destroyer Tokitsukaze at 12:20 hours documented Beaufort scale force 5, producing turbulence that complicated bomb site calibration. Allied operations in the 72-hour period expended 458 sorties, 879,000 rounds of 30 caliber and 50 caliber ammunition, and 773 bombs, totaling 131,000 kilograms. In return, the gain was absolute interdiction. 8 transports and 4 destroyers lost for Japan, with 0 meters of forward progress achieved past 7 degrees south, 148 degrees east. The cost-benefit calculus revealed an expenditure rate of 1,180 bombs per kilometer of denied coastline, and 27 hours of continuous engagement per 1,000 meters of contested sea lane. No subsequent seaborne reinforcement attempts were recorded after this operation. At coordinate 6 degrees, 45 minutes south, 147 degrees, 00 minutes east, Allied forces composed the assault arm of the U.S. 5th Air Force and Royal Australian Air Force with 137 aircraft, including 52 B-25 Mitchell bombers, 22 A-20 Havoc attack planes, 31 P-38 Lightning fighters, 20 Beaufighter fighters, and 12 Hudson bombers. Ground-based intelligence detachments totaled 97 men, integrated with 2 SCR-270 radar stations positioned inland at Finschhafen. Aircrew readiness rosters registered 286 eligible flyers, with maintenance support teams on a 6-hour rotation. Auxiliary oilers and fuel trucks, totaling 16 vehicles, operated a refuel and sortie cycle dictated by rapid aircraft turnaround procedures. Allied staff briefings at WWII Airfield specified operational command posts at 122 men each, distributed across forward observer, weather, and anti-aircraft coordination sections. The enemy Japanese convoy initiated its lay run in double-column formation consisting of 8 destroyers comprising 3 Fubuki-class, 2 Shiratsuyu-class, and 3 Kagero-class ships, and 8 merchant transports, including Taimei Maru and Nojima Maru. Each destroyer featured concrete armored ammunition magazines with 17-centimeter reinforced bulkheads. Defensive trench systems bored into Rabaul's low escarpments extended to depths of 3.1 meters, with observation posts at 9.8 meters. Each destroyer mounted Type 96 twin-barrel anti-aircraft guns, and each transport retained 2 single-barrel mountings. Onboard troop capacity per transport averaged 850 men, compressed into holds with timber shoring and steel crossbraces, with evacuation ladders every 17 meters. Command structure aboard was centralized to Captain Masatomi Kimura, with distributed execution to 4 shipboard radio teams. Logistical data established that Allied B-25 Mitchell aircraft carried 1,167 rounds of .5 caliber ammunition per gun at maximum operational load, with B-17 bombers allocated 1,200 rounds each for their 50 caliber defensive arrays. Fuel allocation per aircraft was maintained at 780 U.S. gallons, ensuring operational range of up to 1,700 miles. Bomb payload distribution averaged 1,900 kilograms per B-25, with each bow fighter assigned 786 rounds for nose-mounted Hispano 20mm cannons. Allied supply lines from Port Moresby to Dobadura spanned 51 miles by overland convoy and 108 nautical miles by coastal resupply, with scheduled intervals for parts and fuel replenishment at 14 hours. Rear echelon maintenance battalions operated under a 2-shift, 9-hour cycle, handling munitions, rearming, and aircraft repairs in fortified dispersal zones. Weather on 2 March registered mixed cloud ceilings at 3,600 feet, with prevailing east-northeast winds at 14 knots. Visibility at launch measured 3,100 yards, reducing to 2,600 yards as combustion product and propeller wash increased above the operational area. Ground viscosity at Dobadura and Finchafen was classified as Category 3 under Allied engineering charts, confirming moderate traction for taxiing and expediting bomb loading procedures. Tactical disposition prioritized heavy fighter cover above the initial attack package, descending to staggered low-level flights at 75 meters above sea level for skip bombing runs. At 1000 hours, the tide at Leh receded to the 0.8-meter tidal flat marker, restricting Japanese rescue operations from shore. Meteorological updates were broadcast to all squadrons on a 34-minute schedule using SCR-161 field radios, synchronizing timing for bomb run approaches and egress maneuvers under variable weather conditions. First confirmed contact between Allied air elements and the Japanese convoy occurred at 09:43 hours on March 3, 1943, at a distance of 3,800 meters, with B-25 Mitchells making approach at engine speeds stabilized at 2,350 RPM. Curtiss P-40 Warhawks provided forward screening at 305 knots. The primary offensive utilized low-level skip bombing at altitudes ranging from 70 to 110 meters, with .50 caliber Browning machine guns primed for immediate suppression of deck anti-aircraft teams. Initial targeting sequences prioritized lead and trail transports, exploiting convoy column gaps. The opening assault registered a concentration of fire within a 450-meter radius, maximizing bomb bounce trajectory and nose fuse activation, coordinated through pre-programmed bomb racks, set for rapid interval release. Within 11 minutes of initial attack, the Japanese convoy responded with intensifying anti-aircraft fire from Type 96 and Type 98 mounts, each discharging at a cyclic rate of 525 rounds per minute. Destroyer Akikaze and transport Shinai Maru coordinated overlapping arcs of flak at determined intervals, generating mutually supporting kill zones at 1,100 meters. Lead destroyers deployed smoke projectors rated at 22 kilograms per minute output, attempting to obstruct Allied visual targeting solutions. Japanese Zeke and Oscar fighters from the 11th Air Fleet circled into the engagement zone, initiating 6 interception sorties over a 44-minute window. P-38 Lightning escorts engaged in 13 dogfights, depleting 2 aircraft but maintaining overall air superiority. The convoy's counterfire intensity momentarily forced withdrawal and repositioning of 2 attacking squadrons at 0958 hours. Supporting fire elements from the Naval Gunfire Liaison Section activated coded SCR 536 radio logs for immediate artillery fire coordination. B-25 bombers communicated ordnance expenditure in real time, transmitting munition codes, referencing Mark 13 bombs and M64 500-pound general-purpose bombs. During peak engagement, payload delivery averaged 1,040 kilograms per aircraft, with coordinated pattern bombing across 2 staggered lines for maximum hull breach effect. Field reports documented concentrated bursts of 30 caliber cover fire from low-flying A-20 Havocs, supported by Beaufighter nose cannon strafing. Communications from Squadron Commander Major Paul the Gunn detailed 16 critical message intercepts regarding anti-aircraft burst coordinates and real-time visual damage confirmations, fed into the ongoing strike plan. By 13:17 hours, the convoy reached grid coordinates 7 degrees, 09 minutes south, 148 degrees, 14 minutes east, recording a cumulative 14,200 rounds of .5 caliber ammunition expended from 19 attacking aircraft. Bomb release logs indicated 47 bombs deployed in the previous 23 minutes. 2 transports were confirmed adrift and on fire, with the destroyer Shirayuki listing at a 9-degree angle following direct ordnance penetration. Supply ship Kyokusei Maru reported catastrophic cargo explosion via intercepted distress signal. The command reporting chain recorded 12 aircraft damaged, with 1 forced ditching at 14:53 hours north of Cape Ward Hunt. Combat status at 1440 hours described the Japanese convoy as fragmented, no longer maintaining column formation, and under persistent Allied aerial pursuit. At precisely 08:01 hours, Captain William S. Keyes, operating off the port bow of the Japanese transport Taimei Maru, at map coordinates 7 degrees, 15 minutes south, 148 degrees, 40 minutes east, identifies via binoculars a structural seam running just abaft the number 3 cargo hatch, exposed by the morning sun at low tide. This section reveals a thinner hull plate seam intersecting with main deck support beams, offering a key vulnerability not previously registered on initial aerial reconnaissance maps taken by the Australian No. 22 Squadron. Targeting this compromised point, Captain Keyes marks it as the breach location for the incoming skip bombing run, relaying the position verbally by radio to Lieutenant George Hibbert in a trailing B-25 Mitchell. Within 90 seconds, a composite assault team comprising 3 men from the U.S. 400th Bomb Squadron, weighed down by 32 kilograms, 71 pounds, of M1A1 Bangalore torpedoes, and 2 Royal Australian Air Force sappers, each carrying 19 kilograms, 42 pounds, of satchel charges, pace along the wet, splintered decks toward the forward hatch. The collective weight of personnel, explosives, and standard issue equipment brings the team's total carried load to 195 kilograms, 430 pounds, with each member additionally bearing 1.8 kilograms, 4 pounds, in incendiary grenades and demolition tools. Their equipment is tightly strapped in canvas bandoliers, optimized for rapid emplacement during imminent detonation drills. Visibility on deck is limited to 47 yards due to acrid smoke from burning oil, and hostile Type 96 anti-aircraft gunners are observed to have a maximum 36-degree traverse speed in the rear mount, restricting their response time to lateral movements beyond 11 yards before motor cutout. Using this limited window, the team advances beneath the mid-deck catwalk, sheltered temporarily by the ship's own superstructure, as crisscrossed tracer fire arcs overhead and shrapnel punctures the midship's lifeboat. Supports. Forward progress is dictated by the cadence of incoming fighter strafing, coordinated via tactical radio with Australian P-40 escorts. Reaching the designated breach, the sappers slide the Bangalore section through the identified hull seam, overlapping it by 1.3 meters to maximize charge interface with both structural and riveted steel. A No. 6 instantaneous fuse with a 9-second chemical delay is inserted, leveraging potassium nitrate cord, ignited via friction sparker for reliable activation under compromised humidity. The accompanying satchel charges are hand-positioned at a 45-degree offset to direct maximum fragment yield into the hold, while all personnel withdraw to the aft quarter in strict compliance with duress protocol. The resulting explosion initiates at precisely T plus 9 seconds, sending an overpressure wave peaking at 2,580 pounds per square inch through the cargo deck. Hull fragmentation creates a breach measuring 2.1 by 1.5 meters instantly, destabilizing the bulkhead. The initial shock wave propels loose deck fragments at 64 meters per second, clearing an internal path for the inverse assault team. Within the span of 3.4 seconds, the breach admits full passage for a 6-man formation, opening a corridor from the starboard railing directly into the bomb-struck center hold as the first fires ignite secondary ammunition stores. The M1A1 Bangalore torpedoes employed in this assault consisted of modular 1.5-meter sections, each filled with 2.3 kilograms, 5 pounds, of high-explosive composition B, yielding a total filler mass of 11.5 kilograms, 25 pounds, for the primary array. Composition B, a mix of RDX and TNT, demonstrated an explosive velocity of 8,000 meters per second and brissants sufficient to shear mild steel at close proximity. Their modular threads allowed rapid assembly beneath fire, while the copper-lined booster charge optimized directed blast along pre-identified hull seams, aiding penetration of the 11mm steel plate. Each charge's seamless steel exterior improved resistance to premature detonation from ambient machine gun fire or foreign metallic debris, making it the weapon of choice for hull breaching in high-risk operational zones. Defensive geometry failed under coordinated pressure, as the intended interlocking fire arcs from Type 96 and Type 93. Machine guns presented substantial dead zones. Gun emplacements were staggered in overlapping 38-degree sectors, but rusted traverse gears limited practical lateral coverage to 22 degrees, once clogged by bomb debris. MG-42 emplacements, positioned for optimal crossfire, experienced dead zones spanning up to 19 degrees to their immediate flanks. Unable to depress muzzles, past deck obstacles, or target breaches occurring below the main deck line. This permitted breaching teams to exploit avenues shielded from direct fire, minimizing countering casualties during rapid emplacement of charges and denying overlapping suppression from present crew-served weapons. Assault mechanics within the pillbox fortifications on deck required precise tool deployment. U.S.-issue M2 flamethrowers were utilized for immediate post-breach clearing at 1,250 degrees Celsius, consuming 11 liters of napalm at a rate of 0.33 liters per second through kink-resistant hoses. These devices featured dual nitrogen pressurization bottles delivering continual flame arcs with an average unobstructed reach of 24 meters. Operators routinely exchanged canister packs after 36 seconds of operation, maintaining uninterrupted suppression. Australian assault engineers used amatol-based satchel charges for cavity clearance, their shaped canvas construction designed to hug compartment geometry and optimize blast placement for rapid neutralization of secondary machine gun nests. Ballistic analysis revealed the US M1A1 satchel charge, weighing 9.1 kilograms, 20 pounds, detonated at a blast radius of 7.5 meters and generated localized overpressure in excess of 2,900 psi. Shockwaves propagated through confined deck spaces, inducing panel separation and catastrophic pressure differential between adjoining holds. Metallurgical disintegration of the 11mm deck plate resulted from microfractures accelerated by the compounded charge velocity. Fragment distribution. Analytics showed 70% of shrapnel remained below the splinter deck, inflicting high lateral damage to internal crew quarters and cargo contents. Blast overpressure measured by remote sensors exceeded pre-battle estimates by 13%, hastening total systemic failure in breached compartments. Evidence compiled from U.S. 400th Squadron radio logs and intercepted Japanese distress calls quantifies the tactical effect. Over 17 meters of hull length converted from contiguous defensive screen to exposed breach corridor within 15 seconds post-explosion. Allied spotter reports, consolidated through SCR 274N radio sets, document enemy personnel displacement and a 31-meter-wide, unopposed corridor, through which follow-on assault teams advanced. Japanese radio transmissions at 08:12 hours confirm compromised watertight integrity across 3 contiguous compartments. Allied ground controllers immediately confirmed secondary fire teams' advance through both audible signals and visual semaphore, verifying the breadth of the breach at each successive checkpoint in line with the planned attack progression. Scaling the blast-cleared slope at 08:15 hours, the combined assault force gained 4.6 meters of elevation within 56 seconds, moving briskly across debris-strewn planking under enemy sniper fire originating from the stern winch. Structural beams warped by concussive force forced the team to adopt a staggered crawling approach, covering open deck sections whilst maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Despite attempts by Japanese riflemen to re-establish a defensive perimeter, The breached passage allowed unimpeded access for the initial group. Resistance encountered included sporadic 7.7 millimeter rifle volleys and ineffectual grenade fragments, further mitigated by smoke cover from secondary fires ignited in the hold. Australian sappers provided covering demolition for flanking approaches, allowing movement to proceed at an average speed of 5.2 meters per 11-second interval. Command promptly assessed the operation's mounting cost. U.S. Forces recorded 2 fatalities and 3 wounded from shrapnel and sniper fire, while ammunition stocks for M1 carbines dropped to 31% after the breach. The demolition team expended 6 of 8 satchel charges and 3 of 4 Bangalore torpedoes, with radio traffic indicating a critical need for immediate resupply. New orders from battalion headquarters, relayed at 18 hours over SCR 271 frequency, directed all available riflemen and sappers to consolidate gains and prepare a secondary push towards the main engine compartment. Simultaneously, a fire control officer adjusted close air support boundaries to prevent friendly fire incidents, while an Australian forward observer marked enemy resistance nests for targeted napalm airstrikes in the subsequent wave. The immediate aftermath provided quantifiable outcomes. 3 deck-level bunkers were neutralized, yielding control of the central hold and access to forward machinery spaces. 6 Japanese prisoners were taken from adjacent compartments, suffering burns and blast injuries from the initial explosions. A critical intelligence packet was discovered on one prisoner, containing hand-sketched maps of the overall convoy formation to be transmitted to Allied headquarters for expedited analysis. As the clock struck 08:22 hours, follow-on elements began to deploy fresh explosives and clear additional barricades, with the assault teams now holding a decisive breachhead, separating forward and aft Japanese defensive groups. This state set the conditions for the next phase's flanking action, seeking to encircle the remaining enemy holdouts along the forward superstructure. Did you know that the Japanese High Command's initial doctrine for Operation 81 promised a seamless delivery of supplies to Leh, yet the reality on the ground exposed crippling logistical failures? The planned transport of 6,900 troops depended on synchronized shipments of ammunition, fuel, and food, but intercepted orders recovered by Allied units later revealed that less than 19% of the intended fuel and only half the rice and rations were ever distributed before sailing. On March 1, 1943, several trucks broke down at Rabaul, forcing late-stage scrambles to load munitions by hand in darkness. Witness accounts recorded workers using lanterns and covering leaking drums with tarps to minimize spillage. This rush meant that destroyers set out already below basic operational reserve levels, raising the risk profile long before the convoy hit the Bismarck Sea. What is less often discussed is the state of the Japanese enlisted ranks during the battle, which was far below what official records admitted. Captured diaries from transport vessels, collected weeks later by patrols from the 32nd Infantry Regiment, described desperate shortages of fresh drinking water and unsterilized medical supplies. A Japanese staff officer wrote, "Each man receives 2 handfuls of dried rice. The water tanks taste of oil." Interrogation reports from survivors found off Goodenough Island noted makeshift bandages made from sacking, and that many troops were barefoot, their original boots having rotted through weeks earlier. One surviving transport's orders, found preserved inside a glass bottle, instructed crews to ration both drinking water and morphine at rates far below peacetime standards, highlighting silent suffering and isolation within the convoy. Environmental factors are almost absent from most accounts, yet these proved decisive. Meteorological logs from RAAF, meteorological flights, recorded freak wind shifts and sudden squalls at altitudes below 400 meters on March 3, 1943. Allied pilots, using newly developed skip bombing tactics, suddenly found rain squalls obscuring targets and buffeting their aircraft, forcing last-moment course corrections. Yet these same squalls drove smoke and burning debris from the Japanese ships directly into low-flying paths, at one point shielding 3 transports but blinding their gunners. The chaos is described in the combat log of Flight Lieutenant Gordon Jenkins as gray-black vapor mixing with salt, blocking sun and sight. These weather anomalies created moments where technology and nature collided, reshaping the battle minute by minute. Statistically, the devastation of the battle approached what mathematicians have since called a 1 in 30 outcome for convoy annihilation in 1943. Pre-mission intelligence assessments estimated that even with surprise, no more than 5 Japanese transports would be lost in a single engagement. Yet 8 transports and 4 destroyers were sunk across 3 days. A post-war simulation by the United States Army Air Forces in 1946 concluded that replication of these results, given known variables, enemy fighter strength, supply levels, weather, would yield total convoy destruction only 3% of the time. As Chief of Operations Colonel Richard Carmichael noted in his classified summary, that level of success was never in the books. In the immediate post-war era of the 1940s and 1950s, official Allied accounts depicted the Battle of the Bismarck Sea as a triumph of new air power doctrines and technical bravado, with histories issued by both the United States and Australia framing the entire battle as an inevitable textbook demonstration of aerial supremacy. Reports written for military archives omitted references to supply shortages or last-minute risks and buried unpleasant details of the Japanese troops suffering at sea. Victory was narrated as a clean, clinical result, casualty figures simply rounded to tens of thousands, and no mention made of the rare environmental phenomena or close Allied doubts surrounding the mission's likelihood of success. The declassification of signals intelligence in the 1970s and again in the 1990s fundamentally altered public understanding of the Bismarck Sea fight, especially with the release of intercepted Japanese orders, Allied cryptanalysis logs, and the Frumel code-breaking summaries. These documents revealed just how critical intelligence was in guiding Allied air fleets to intercept points and exposed the improvisation, supply shortages, and hasty Japanese decisions. Formerly sanitized reports were now scrutinized for omission of Allied debates and operational disagreements. Historians began to challenge the earlier myth of flawless Allied planning, noting personal rivalries and the uncertainty that shrouded the use of untested tactics, such as skip bombing in the Pacific Air War. Contemporary historians now emphasize the scale of human loss and have revised earlier undercounts of Japanese casualties. In the 1950s, official records placed the death toll at roughly 3,000. With access to Japanese post-war memorial records and forensic studies from the 2000s, current research supports a revised estimate exceeding 5,000 dead. Scholars such as Dr. Richard Frank argue that the aftermath for survivors, those rescued by submarines or cast away on islands, should not be discounted, as evidence shows hundreds died of wounds or starvation in the following weeks. This recalibration has led to a narrative that foregrounds suffering and consequence rather than simple operational efficiency, correcting long-standing misrepresentations. From a doctrinal perspective, the lessons of March 2nd to March 4th, 1943 became instantly codified in Allied tactical and field manuals. The Bismarck Sea operation was cited in 6th and 7th Air Force syllabus appendices as proof of the effectiveness of combined skip bombing, massed low-level attack, and coordinated code breaking for real-time targeting. Training for bomber crews shifted toward lower-altitude assault profiles. Pilot after-action reports from 1944 onward specifically referenced March 1943 as the precedent for new approaches to ship targeting. Post-war manuals emphasized flexibility, frequency of intelligence updates, and the vital role of operational adaptability, a direct outcome of the trial and errors. Success achieved in these 3 days of high-stakes experimentation. Flight Sergeant Arthur McNulty had trained as a schoolteacher in the quiet suburbs of Sydney before enlisting with the Royal Australian Air Force. That background offered no preparation for the precise maneuvers he executed over the Bismarck Sea, yet his methodical calm on March 3, 1943, meant tracking engine noise, counting flak bursts, then steering into a near-vertical attack run. The transformation from educator to frontline airman became complete when fellow crewmen later recalled his steady navigation through storms of tracer fire. A diary entry from McNulty simply notes, "No lesson plan for this one, but every second counted." His actions reflected a meticulous approach, born far from battlefields, now repurposed for survival. In the immediate wake of the battle, a low tide revealed floating cargo splintered crates, torn life belts, and the slick iridescence of oil leaching into shallows near Leh. Veterans remembered a constant undertone of buzzing from crippled engines and sporadic popping from burning ammunition. The air held the sharp bite of cordite, layered against the gritty taste of wind-driven sand, and clothes stuck to skin with a mixture of sweat and airborne fuel vapor. Corporal Joseph Takahashi of the 51st Infantry Division, in his fragmentary journal, wrote, "Night came with only the sound of things burning and no words left." Above the wreckage, smoke trails curled skyward, marking the sea's losses with stark precision. Letters home from survivors and victors alike often omitted the full scope of what had been witnessed. One unsent draft from aircraftman William Harris began, "We did our part. The convoy will not reach Leh," but omitted mention of drifting bodies, the sight of torn uniforms on lifeless forms trapped in lifeboat netting, and crewmen searching for friendly signals in seas choked with debris. Instead, his censored letter spoke only of technical accomplishments, safe landings, well-executed formations, and praise from superiors, leaving unspoken the images of loss. The things left between the lines spoke to a kind of self-censorship, both for the home front and for personal survival after the engagement. For both Japanese and Allied participants, the aftermath imposed a physical exhaustion only worsened by the extended search operations. Debrief records measured pulse rates exceeding 120 beats per minute hours after landing, and medical teams recorded dehydration and heat stress in nearly every member of the U.S. 5th Air Force's 22nd Bombardment Group. Some aircrews spent 18 consecutive hours at readiness stations before being properly relieved. Japanese survivors clung to bits of wood or overturned rafts for up to 42 hours before encountering rescue craft, with body temperatures in some dropping below 35 degrees Celsius. A division chaplain later wrote, "Longest day of breath, the sea gave back only the living, no comfort for the lost." The immediate outcome of the Battle of the Bismarck Sea triggered a decisive tactical shift in the New Guinea campaign. Within 48 hours of the final air assault, Allied reconnaissance confirmed the sinking of all 8 troop transports and 4 destroyers, ensuring that less than 1,200 out of 6,900 Japanese troops ever reached Leh. This catastrophic attrition left an estimated 50 square kilometers of eastern New Guinea unreinforced by fresh Japanese units, directly enabling the 32nd Infantry Division to execute rapid advances between Salamaua and Leh. With supplies, heavy weapons, and vehicles lost to the sea, the Japanese garrison on the Huon Peninsula became isolated, exposing key airfields and logistics nodes to relentless Allied pressure by 1,200 hours, March 5, 1943. Operationally, Allied High Command exploited this victory with immediate and permanent adjustments. General Douglas MacArthur issued direct orders to General George Kenney of the 5th Air Force to intensify air interdiction tactics along all maritime approaches to New Guinea and the Bismarck Archipelago. The success of skip bombing and masthead attacks led to their formal adoption in Air Sols operations throughout early 1943. Japanese Combined Fleet Command, recognizing the unsustainable losses, sent urgent signals on March 6, 1943, prohibiting all major naval transports to Leh and Madang. This decision left the 18th Army's supply and reinforcement lines fatally severed, compelling Imperial Japanese Army units to attempt desperate overland crossings through the Owen Stanley Range, with documented casualty rates exceeding 40% due to starvation and disease. Long-term, the destruction of the Leh convoy irrevocably influenced the Pacific Campaign's trajectory. The Japanese Army possessed no further reserves capable of amphibious redeployment in the Southwest Pacific, conceding permanent air and naval initiative to Allied forces. The absence of further seaborne reinforcements directly set the stage for the Allied inland advance, culminating in the capture of Leh by the Australian 7th and 9th Divisions on September 16, 1943. The Bismarck Sea engagement's lessons were later codified in the Air-Sea Battle Doctrine, shaping operational planning for the Huon Peninsula advance and the eventual island-hopping assaults on the Philippine archipelago. By shifting the balance of logistics and force projection, the Battle of the Bismarck Sea contributed directly to closing the strategic ring around Rabaul, the principal Japanese bastion in the South Pacific. From 1944 onward, the Japanese Navy never attempted a comparable convoy operation in the theater. The cumulative effect of this battle, coupled with subsequent Allied landings at Nassau Bay and Finschhafen, initiated the irreversible fragmentation of Japanese territorial holdings between New Britain, New Ireland, and the northern coast of New Guinea. The grave defeat in March 1943 became the inflection point at which Japanese offensive capability in the Southwest Pacific declined past recovery, anchoring Allied momentum until the surrender in 1945. If the Allied air operation against the Bismarck Sea convoy had failed, the strategic calculus in the Southwest Pacific would have been fundamentally altered. Had 6,900 Japanese reinforcements landed at Leh intact, the garrison's strength would have doubled, stabilizing the Japanese defensive perimeter and forestalling the Allied offensive for several additional months. Japanese engineers could have established forward supply depots, expanded anti-aircraft coverage, and constructed fortified airfields within striking distance of Port Moresby, potentially threatening Allied logistics as late as summer 1943. The loss of Allied aircrews and aircraft in a failed attack, likely exceeding 60 bombers and 400 men, would have forced General Kenney to suspend offensive operations, risking a resumption of Japanese counteroffensives along the Kokoda track and possibly prolonging the campaign into 1944. Measured against comparably critical battles, such as the destruction of the Japanese convoy at Leyte Gulf, or the German Luftwaffe's annihilation at Falaise, the Bismarck Sea engagement, ranks as one of the most lopsided sea-air defeats in World War II. The ratio of attackers to defenders, the speed of execution, and the attrition of over 5,000 Japanese personnel in 48 hours exceeded even the losses suffered by the Imperial Japanese Navy at the Battle of Midway in June 1942. Unlike Midway, where the main effect was naval, the Bismarck Sea air assault targeted the core of enemy ground reinforcements, inflicting a casualty rate above 80% on targeted troop movements. The loss of 12 ships in a single action, over 40,000 gross register tons, exceeded the cumulative losses incurred by Japanese convoy operations during the Guadalcanal campaign. Modern military historians generally concur that the strategic importance of the Bismarck Sea battle has been underrated in public memory relative to headline events like Midway or D-Day. Recent archival research, particularly the 2017 release of decrypted Frumal communications and U.S. Army Air Force's after-action reports, has demonstrated that this operation marked the critical boundary between Japanese expansion and Allied counteroffensive in the theater. Unlike protracted ground battles, the compressed 72-hour timeline of the engagement and the innovative use of air-sea coordination make it a canonical model for joint operations. Recent doctrinal studies by the U.S. Army War College and the Australian War Memorial have elevated the operation's status within strategic curricula, underscoring its function as the Pacific War's logistical turning point. The aftermath for the surviving Japanese and Allied units was stark and immediate. The Japanese 51st Division, intended as the backbone of Lei's defense, ceased to exist as a coherent fighting force after March 1943. The division was formally disbanded in the Imperial Army reorganization of August 10, 1943. Less than 700 men managed to return from New Guinea by war's end. On the Allied side, the 5th Air Force continued to refine low-level bombing through 1945 before transitioning to the Strategic Air Command post-war. Detachments of the Royal Australian Air Force, No. 30 Squadron, which flew Beaufighters in the battle, were reassigned to Homeland Defense and ultimately dissolved on May 21, 1946, in Darwin. The Bismarck Sea's resting places remain marked to this day by Commonwealth war graves and Japanese cenotaphs along the remote northern coast of Morobe Province. Memorial obelisks stand at Ley War Cemetery, Bomana War Cemetery near Port Moresby, and by the Nadzab airstrip, listing the thousands lost in the sea. An Australian National Memorial at Madong details the losses of March 1943 and remains a primary site of annual remembrance, drawing relatives and historians every March. Underwater surveys, some conducted as recently as 2022 by the Papua New Guinea Maritime Museum, have mapped transport wrecks at depths from 41 to 250 meters, now ecological sanctuaries, amid scattered personal effects and corroded hulls. Definitively, the Battle of the Bismarck Sea stands as a test case in cost versus value. A total of 13 Allied aircrew lost exchanged for the collapse of Japanese reinforcement capability in the Southwest Pacific. The tactical innovation forced by desperate necessity skip bombing and masthead attacks saved thousands of Allied lives in subsequent operations. The human cost is permanently etched into military archives, while the shattered remains beneath the Bismarck Sea serve as silent testimony to the irreversible pivot of war. The cost in lives was severe, but the strategic value reshaped the Pacific War's outcome. History demands more than recollection. It requires examination and reflection. If the story of 72 hours of impossible fire, 14,000 lost in the Bismarck Sea, has deepened your understanding, consider sharing this documentary with others who value fact-driven military history. Subscribe for further explorations into pivotal battles and untold consequences. And if you have personal stories or archival materials related to this campaign, we invite you to contribute to our ongoing research. Only by examining the hardest-won lessons can we honor those who served and ensure the truth endures. Engage, remember, and question. The next discovery begins with you.